So I think, like, James was speaking earlier, we're talking in terms of maybe a decade, but in 10 years times, I think people may start here as a means to start their musical journey and then venture off backwards into hardware and keyboards and things of that nature.
Hello and welcome back to the channel, everybody. I am your host, Vortex, from MobileMusicPro.com, your home for mobile music production. And we are back at it again with even more iOS music discussion from some very prominent developers in the iOS space. And don't forget, we want to hear from you guys as well on these topics, so definitely make sure to leave your thoughts in the comments below. But before we do get started, I just wanted to quickly thank all of our panelists today, especially James, who was signing in from the UK, so I think it was like 1 or 2 in the morning his time. So thank you guys so much again for taking time out of your busy schedule to be on the show. All right, and now without further ado, let's get right into the 8th episode of this podcast, and I very much hope you enjoy. Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Mobile Music Roundtable podcast right here on the Mobile Music Pro YouTube channel. Thank you guys so much for joining us. Today I am super excited yet again to bring you some amazing people for this podcast, guys. We have producers on here, we have app developers, we have all sorts of different people, but today we are focused on some topics that are relating a little bit to WWDC. So without further ado, let's go and introduce these amazing panelists. So first up, guys, we have James from Amplify Music, which is the creators of the Launchpad app, of course, Groovebox app, the Bloxwave app. All of these apps I use a ton. So James, how you doing today?
Good, thanks. Good, thanks, Vortex. How are you?
Very, very well. I really appreciate you being here, man, because I know it's like 1 or 2 in the morning over there in the UK. So I just appreciate your time so much, man.
No worries, no worries.
All right.
Glad to be here.
Yes, sir. Next up, then, we got Mr. Jam O'Clay. You guys might call him Kem, C-E-M, but it's actually pronounced Jam, believe it or not. So, Mr. Jam O'Clay, the creator of Scalebud, Polybud, Melodybud, Loopbud, Artbud, lots of buds. He's your bud. So, Jam, how you doing today, bro?
I'm great, man. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely, man. Really glad to finally meet all of you guys for sure. Been using your apps for years, so really always a privilege to meet you guys, to meet the developers behind these amazing creations. And then finally, we have Mr. Mike, aka MS Simp, which is the founder of MSX Sound Design. They got everything over there, guys, courses, sample packs, but they are the creators of the famous app Low Fly Dirt, Fly Tape, and Chompler. How you doing, Mike?
I'm good, man. Thanks for having me. Honored to be here.
Man, super appreciate finally meeting you as well, dude. Again, using your apps for years, man. Try to sing the praises of Low Fly Dirt like crazy for sure. And yeah, man, it's just really glad to have you here. So we got a great show for you today. We got a bunch of different topics we're going to get to. So let's get to the very first one, which is I want to know everybody's thoughts on the Stage Manager, coming from WWDC, the floating windows now that are coming to iOS 16, and Apple trying to bring a more Mac-like or a more desktop-like UI to the iPad. So first, we're going to go around the table. So we'll start out with, we'll start with Mike first, and then we'll start with James next time. So Mike, what are your thoughts on the Stage Manager, this evolution of the iPad, where we're now getting desktop-like UIs? What is the future? Where is this going? And what do you think about this evolution?
I mean, personally, I do think, I think over the years, we've just seen the trend of things getting ready to get to the point of merging, to where the line is blurred between, my laptop or even my desktop to a degree, give or take a mouse and my iPad. I like the idea of things that enhance workflow. So if it enhances the workflow, if I can get to, my efficiency quicker, I think it makes sense. I'm not sure how much this makes more sense for me as far as like how I use mission control. We'll see. I think time will tell on that. But I think as we get closer to, Apple eventually basically turning the iPad into what's considered a MacBook or what's considered, Mac OS X, I think it makes a lot of sense. I don't know personally how much it'll actually affect what I'm doing, but I can definitely see a lot of use case for it. So
absolutely. Do you see Apple like maybe further combining the MacBook and iPad into a single device one day, or are they just going to try to keep these mediums separate?
Well, that's an interesting thing because just even from a business perspective, you can almost see some cannibalism going on between the products. You see what I'm saying? So I don't know how much sense that makes on their part to actually, merge the two products and then create one product out of one when they're both probably selling, out the wazoo. So it just looks like things are trending that way, but how it'll merge, one of the things that we kind of talk about in camp is just maybe just a dock. And the dock is actually the brain of everything. And what I'd like to see is if I have my iPad, I can just plop it on the dock. And then everything that I have on the desktop is the same, that is just basically just used as a display at that point. You see what I'm saying? But you still have the processing power, the chip speed, and all of those good things. And then when I leave my studio, everything that I was doing on desktop actually can go with me when I take my iPad. So I can see something like that maybe working. But as far as like merging everything to where everything is just now one product, I don't know if that makes a lot of sense from a business perspective. Granted, we are talking about a company that business wise, I think they're doing just fine. So wouldn't make a difference to them either way. But, I look at also things like, you have support for multiple different products. How does that look with Apple stores, their efficiency and returns and repairs and things of that nature. So there are a lot of benefits to just creating just one particular product, but I don't know if that's where it's going. It just, at this stage of everything, it kind of looks that way.
Yeah, it's weird. It's interesting because, like you mentioned the word cannibalism, and that's kind of what people have been saying. They're like, look, they're never going. Apple is never going to dedicate the time and effort and toward the iPad when they're selling all these MacBooks. Like, why would they do that? And but then you mentioned that dock, and that reminds me, of course, of the recent patents that we've seen from Apple, where they're basically creating that dock that you're talking about, where you could just slap on the iPad, and then maybe it can connect to your desktop, have everything in there, and then, like you say, take it away as you go. Something like that seems more sound to me, where that's going to be like the norm. And then if you do want more power, then that would be like maybe a normal server like system, or a normal big huge system, because of course you still have thermodynamics to deal with when you're talking about crazy rendering and stuff. But for 99%, right, of your average use case, even video editing, music production, you should be able to maybe do all that on that single device, and then just hook it up to a larger monitor. I think that would maybe be the way that they do it. Any thoughts on that?
I think that is the way to go. Personally, that's how I'd like to see it, and I'd like to feel confident that if I'm out or I'm traveling, whatever I work on can seamlessly integrate to what I bring back to the house, or back to, my office space. I think that makes, again, we're speaking from a creative standpoint, you know what I mean? So a lot of the work that we do, we actually work in those manners. There's a lot more people that I know personally that use Mac, it's just more of a stationary item for them. So that there's not a lot of use case for that, but in the creative world, I can see use case for that all day long. So I would love to see something like that, where no matter where I'm at, I can dial into what I was working on and not lose anything, from processing speed to graphics to anything. I would love to be able to take that on the go. Even if it costs me a little bit more to have that device mobile with me, I'd be fine with even paying that.
Yeah, and that's what I think as well, because people were talking about the iPads becoming more expensive than MacBooks. But look, you're paying for this magical piece of glass. This thing is like literally a third the weight of the MacBook Air, which is the Apple's lightest device. So I mean, this is just, and then they keep making them lighter. So it's like,
well, think about the price that you're spending. Like if you go and max out the new iPhone and you hold that up to an iPad, like, I mean, we've kind of already been there. You see what I'm saying? And even the iPhone kind of brings in a little bit more portability to that, because now you may want to seamlessly integrate everything you're doing on your iPad to your iPhone, and just have a round robin between your desktop, your iPhone, and your iPad. There's a lot of different ways they can go with that. From a business perspective, I don't know if it makes sense to just kill off product lines, but then also from a business perspective, it makes sense to kind of streamline a lot of things as far as having to support multiple different devices.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned that too, because Apple is a company that likes to consolidate. Remember when Steve Jobs, before he came back, they had a bunch of different product lines, right? And Steve Jobs was like, no, we're going to make the iMac. We're going to make one computer, and it's going to be great. And so that's what they've done. The iMac and the MacBook, and like that's all they had for a while. And now they're kind of branching out to a bunch of different kinds of things. But it still seems that consolidation is Apple wouldn't mind killing off a whole product line if they can consolidate hardware. But like you say, from a business perspective, I'm not sure if that's going to make sense, but I could actually see them doing that. And the only reason why is, again, because of that past, that history that Apple is all about. They don't really they can almost eschew profit over design and over usability, because they literally, like you say, richest company in the world, $1 trillion in the bank. So I think they'll be doing good.
a really good point. I mean, if we're being honest, Apple has gotten to the size and the proportion that they exist in the world now through consolidation. You know, they don't want multiple companies out here existing in these spaces. Well, we'll just buy those companies and just continue to grow our conglomerate. You know what I mean? So consolidation has been their MO for years. You know what I mean? So I think what you're saying makes a lot of sense. It makes a lot of sense to consolidate. I just don't know with the way things are trending, how soon we'll see that.
Yeah, I have no idea what that's going to look like, and I
Yeah,
think this is
it'll be a
going to, of
slow
course,
fade, I think.
and I think we agree that this is going to play out over decades. Like this,
Yeah,
we're not
it'll
saying
be a
that this
slow
is
fade.
going to happen next year, guys. Just so you know, we're talking about like 10, 15, maybe 20 years out, how this all plays out. It's just the path that we've seen. But sorry, did you say something, James?
Oh yeah, I was just going to say the time scales that Apple is looking at, it's like 10 years, you know, like it's kind of difficult sometimes to see, I think, what they're heading towards. Obviously, if it wasn't, we wouldn't be having this conversation. But I think that some of that consolidation will lead to things that we're not expecting. And some of it may just be getting some, you know, Mike, you were talking about how you want to seamlessly transition from one device to another. And what would be great in that situation is if you had the same UI, you know, you don't necessarily need to be interacting with it the same, because the whole touch versus mouse thing is still like, that's going to be around for years. I think that's the final hurdle in this question, right? But just having the same kind of gestures or bits of UI on screen is something that Apple does really well. So it wouldn't make sense for them to jot that out if they're trying to promote the iPad as like professional use product. Even if we never get to the point of a consolidated product between the two, it's still beneficial, I think.
Absolutely, I agree. It's still beneficial to keep the UI the same because, like Mike said, I would love the seamless transition. That's the key here. And people have already used to the desktop UI. You know, resizing windows, minimizing windows, all that stuff for decades. And that's why some people are kind of getting on Apple a little bit. Like we just now finally are having floating windows, where obviously we've had this, Android and Microsoft. But look, Apple. They take a little bit longer on some things, and there's a reason for that, because they want to make things as easy as possible, much easier. And it's true. If you look at their devices, you look at macOS, in general, people agree that it's a lot easier to use for the average consumer than something like Windows or Linux. So that's just what they do. And so they're not going to do something until they can do it right. And I believe that they're starting to come around here with floating windows. And again, we saw that patent, and now just after that patent, WWDC, we're getting floating windows. So it seems like it's all the pieces are coming together. So
both of you guys bring up really good points, and as far as like as it relates to what we do, how important UX is. And I think sometimes the general population takes for granted how important UX is. And I'll use this as an example. On one of I think it was iOS 15, the update where when you want to go type something in Safari, it went from the top to the bottom. Have you guys seen the commentary that's been out just on the Twitter and the Facebook forums about how inconvenient that has been for people?
I've seen just a little bit of it. Yeah, people get a little excited on the internet.
And we're talking about just one instance that, people just were like up in arms. I saw, why would this be on the bottom?
People they just hate change.
Exactly.
I mean, that's a big part of it.
Absolutely. And Apple knows this. They know the psychology. They know that people hate change.
Exactly.
Sorry, go ahead, Mike.
So I think to James's point, you want to be able to move between devices, but we don't want to mess with the UI too much. You know what I mean? We want to keep everything seamless so that people still familiar when I go to a new device.
Absolutely. Could not agree more. Jam, you've been a little bit quiet, bro, because I forgot to mention too, we before we started recording that we do go around the table, but everybody is always free to jump in at any time to keep the conversation organic. So Jam, you've been a little bit quiet, man. I got to call on you. What's going on, man? What are your thoughts on this conversation so far?
Oh, well, Stage Manager is interesting. I think it's a great step forward towards the desktop-like experience on iPads. I think it's going to be great for daily usage, like document creation, emails, maybe video and photo editing, the daily tasks. But I don't know if it's going to be useful for the mobile music producers. I don't think any use case. But as a developer, I think that would be interesting if they let us to integrate the Stage Manager into our apps, like imagine using Cubase or AUM on your iPads and being able to lay out your plugins on your external screen, just like the desktop experience. I think it would be awesome. And I'm really excited about the external screen on the WWDC this year.
Absolutely. Full monitor, full
Mhm.
monitor support, or full external monitor support. Finally, guys,
Yes.
no more lines. No more black lines
Yes.
on the side. So that's really great to see. And, I was speaking of that, Jam, I was thinking about it. I'm just super, super excited that we have these floating windows and that the UI is advancing. But then as I started thinking about it, I'm like, wait a second. My workflow is I'm just always in CUBASIS. And then I have AUV3 apps inside of CUBASIS. So it's not even really going to change my workflow unless CUBASIS changes something and allows us to bring our plugins, our AUV3 plugins, to an external display. That would be amazing. Just to be honest, just having floating plugins inside of CUBASIS already would be amazing. But to be able to actually have those plugins on an external monitor, that would be even more awesome. I mean, CUBASIS could go full desktop and allow us to separate our mixer even and put on a second screen. That would be. But I mean, that would be our. I'm sorry, I'm getting too excited.
That would be a game changer.
I'm getting too excited, but that's going to be basically a game changer for sure. But as it stands now, because I am excited about this UI, I'm excited about this evolution. But as a day-to-day, it's really not going to change for me unless CUBASIS changes something. And I couldn't believe it. I'm like, wait a second.
We as developers depend on the Apple on that because they need to provide us the SDKs and stuff like Stage Manager, being able to integrate it to our apps. So we depend on them.
Absolutely. So you have to make sure that's possible.
Us the SDK, I believe everyone would benefit from that.
Yes, please, Apple, make this happen so CUBASIS can put our mixer on a separate screen. Please. Oh my goodness, that would be epic stuff. All right, guys. So it sounds like we're all pretty excited about this, about the changes here, about the Stage Manager, and about Apple updating this UI, making it more professional. I'm really excited to see because remember, this is the first WWDC that they actually full on mentioned, publicly stated with a graphic and everything, that more pro apps are coming to the iPad. They said that. They didn't expand upon it. They basically said it and then boom, moved on to another section. But they got they got Logic Pro in there being worked on. They got Final Cut Pro being worked on. Someday it's gonna come here because they're not gonna put external monitors, M1 and M2 chips in there, all of this RAM, Stage Manager, and so on, if they don't eventually plan on bringing these pro apps. But of course, a lot of people are skeptical, and as they should be, and a lot of people are scared that they might be subscription-based apps, but which I hope they're not. But we'll have to see how it plays out. Any final thoughts on this topic, guys, before we move on?
But we didn't mention driver kit, which from iOS 16 is now available. Obviously, it's been around for years, but this is the first iOS where it's been available. So we should see more, I guess, custom peripherals being used on iPadOS, at least for the M1 iPads.
Yep, very interesting. Driver kit is actually a big mention, a big thing that they came up with. Because like you said, you can now have any type of hardware you were ever going to build for the Mac, you can now build for the iPad because you can make a driver for it. And it will be basically identical to the Mac, with a few little probably exceptions and things. So that's absolutely huge as well. So that's really great for manufacturers who are thinking about making hardware for the iPad. So great points. Any final points on this before we move on? I didn't really want to turn into a WWC show, but man, there's just so much stuff. External monitor support, files, app changes, driver kit. We're really looking forward to the future of iOS. But any final comments on this topic? Nope. All right. Good. So we are going to move on then to our second topic of the day, which is basically with the M2 likely coming to the iPad Pros this fall, and actually maybe even a 14-inch M2 next year, which the rumors have recently been spouting. How important is the multi-core processing to your guys' apps, and how prevalent that is in the ecosystem today? Is that an issue that we should be worrying about, and should we begin today, and how quickly should we begin? So we'll go around this time and start with James. What are your thoughts on multi-core processing? Because as it stands right now, there's not a whole lot of apps that support that. Obviously, CUBASIS does with their multi-core rendering, which is really great when they finally got that working really well. Tons of more power were able to be used. So, James, what are your thoughts on the ecosystem as it is today? Is there enough multi-core processing in the apps? Do they need that multi-core processing? And how much more work do you think that we have to do?
I think it depends on what type of apps you're talking about, because there's quite a large range. Like
True.
CUBASIS is,
And I guess
you
I
know, it's
meant
going to
music.
be like,
I guess I meant music apps.
even just within music. I mean, you've got some pretty simple apps that are pros are using to make music,
Right.
and then you've got all the way up the other end to CUBASIS, which you mentioned. You know, pretty big.
A full-on
Yeah,
DAW.
it's pretty. It's gonna, yeah, full on DAW, a lot of processing. It's going to really make use of that multi-core processing. So I mean, it's great that this kind of thing is going to be available to developers, but I wouldn't expect to see it being hotly adopted. Not unless it is made super easy. I don't want to go too technical on kind of like past frameworks that you've used to do kind of asynchronous things in iOS. But you know, if developers have a really easy way of adopting it, then it will get adopted more quickly.
That's a great point, because multi-thread development, just so people know who are not software developers, has been traditionally pretty difficult. It's definitely not easy. It's not like, oh, we'll just throw this stuff. Oops, sorry. It's not like, oh, we're just going to throw this on another core. Just throw this on another core. I mean, that's in principle what you want to do and have, you know, like for example, with Xbox and video games, they have like audio on one core and some kind of video on another core. But when it comes to actual apps, just traditional software development, it's been pretty difficult to get that stuff working. And that's why I brought it up. I'm like, it's pretty difficult. Do we need to worry about that? Pretty crazy. But like you said, I guess it really only depends on the app, and where if it's a big, huge app like a DAW, then you might want to start focusing more on some of the multi-core processing. But you say for the standard apps, for example, like your apps, the Amplify apps, you probably don't need to worry about multi-core processing.
I don't think they're not so heavily processor dependent that we would need to split. I mean, of course, they're already multi-threaded, so the audio runs on separate area for people that are not technical. That all of your UI is here and all of your audio is over there, and then you've got some other bits and pieces all over the place. But
that's baked in
when it comes to
is that baked into Xcode that allows you to do that?
Yeah. I mean, the adoption of Swift like asynchronous programming is kind of might help more people to adopt it. But yeah, it's still something that I would say most audio developers are already doing. I would be surprised if any audio developer isn't multi-threaded.
Okay, great. Well, that's
but when it comes to when it comes to multi-core, I don't actually know about how you leverage this new technology. If there's an API that you just hook into and it kind of the system does it for you, I don't know.
It's so funny because, you know, Apple loves to tout 8 cores on the M1, you know, 8 cores all the time, but yet I don't know if they provide the SDK for the developers to actually properly utilize all of these cores, because we're already multi-threaded, which is something different than multi-core. Multi-thread means just different threads inside of the same CPU, but multi-core means literally using different CPUs simultaneously. So, but it sounds like you said we probably don't have to worry about that unless Apple makes it really, really super simple in the SDK to do that, right?
Well, if the system decides to split your work across different cores, then it can do that. You never need to do anything like that.
That's true. And
as a developer,
I'm sure some of that is handled in the actual OS already, like you say, to separate UI and keep stuff in the background and memory. So, okay, very interesting stuff. We'll go to. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, when it comes to the actual, you know, technical stuff aside, when it comes to the power of these devices, they're so powerful already that, you know, that people probably wouldn't be worrying about, developers probably won't be worrying about the kind of the power, you know, whether they should leverage these things, because they're just so powerful already that it's like you get this new generation of really powerful devices, and then you see if you can like use all of that power in some way, and then you might hit some bottlenecks, and then you might tone things down a bit, and then the next generation comes along and you get a lot more power to do all the things you wanted to do before.
Yeah, I guess it's true. I mean, just on one core, the M1 is going to be pretty fast and do most of the stuff. So like we say, I guess it's only for those big apps like DAWs and stuff that we got to worry about. So, and I definitely I'm curious about the other developers too. So Jam, what are your thoughts on this topic on using multiple cores? It sounds like you don't really have to probably worry about it for your apps, but we should definitely be keeping an eye on it for the larger apps like CUBASIS.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, M1 is great, and I don't even sure if we are fully taking advantage of M1 properly yet.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I agree with James. We probably depend on the AWS to handle the heavy lifting stuff, because they are usually managing the DSP stuff and UI stuff. And technically, audio developers are using the multi-threading programming traditions, because we have our audio threads separate and our UI threads separate, and we sometimes access to disk for saving presets, stuff like that. So we always use that, but they can they're not guaranteed in separate cores, maybe Apple can handle that stuff on the backgrounds, and we as developers don't need to much worry about them.
Very, very interesting. That would be great, I guess, if Apple could handle the multiple core stuff in the background, and then you just have to worry about the multi-threading stuff, and then maybe the DAW
for example,
would. Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, for example, maybe they release the Logic, and Logic can do DSP on a separate core and UI on the separate core. So that would be amazing. It would be lightning fast, and it would enable to load more DSP heavy AUV trees, or maybe even desktop level plugin makers consider porting their apps to iPads, which would be great for the market. And to be honest, we need that. We need that market, because iOS market is huge. I mean, literally billions of people using their iPhones and iPads like every day, but the music industry is taking a very, 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 very tiny percent of that market. So we desperately need more people and stuff like that, more advanced DSPs like Serum or whatever would bring more people to the iOS music making scene. And I think it would be great.
Absolutely. I think we can definitely all agree that the more and more desktop apps will continue to come to iOS, especially if they start doing even allowing more multiple core stuff and making it easy, because that is the ticket. Because developers, guys, I don't know if you know, but developers, they're a little bit slow to adopt. They love to experiment, but they're very cautious on using new stuff, because it could very well break the whole thing. So it's very, very important. That's why things take a while to actually develop. For example, the AUV3 standard, right? Apple created that in 2015, but there really wasn't a whole ton of apps actually starting using it till 16, 17, 18, right? So very, very important to understand. But that's why I wanted to bring up the multiple core stuff now, because should we start? I want the ecosystem to think about, should we start utilizing this right now, or should we wait a little bit longer? But I think for the bigger apps, you need to start right now. Absolutely right now, like CUBASIS, because the performance difference between using multiple cores and a single core is huge. It's a big 30, 40+%. It's a big difference. So yeah, great point so far. Mike, I definitely want to get your thoughts on this topic as well. Probably the first thing I'm going to do when I get my M1 is load up like as many low-fly dirts as I can to see how many it takes to break it. But what are your thoughts, man, on multiple cores so far?
Yeah, so full disclaimer first, I don't write lines of code.
Sure.
With our apps. That's what's outsourced to our developers here. But just being so heavily involved in conversations back and forth and testing and things like that, it's definitely welcomed. But I think on the side of like James, we just look to the bigger apps, the AUMs, the even GarageBand, which is a heavy test app for us, CUBASIS, to do all of the heavy lifting, and then we just make sure that we're seamlessly integrated in those apps and keeping our CPU down. But I do agree with James' point also. I think that's more about being able to attract the larger companies. You know what I mean? A lot of companies that I deal with and I talk to and I ask them about, some pretty cool apps that they have on the desktop side. And you mentioned, hey, you guys ever consider coming over to the iOS side? And it's always the same pain point. It's not powerful yet enough.
Oh, interesting.
You know what I mean?
That's kind of like the general consensus then
It's
with desktop software developers right now.
Now, granted, I don't know how deeply they're involved with actively being on the iOS side, day to day.
Not enough, clearly.
But
they don't know about the M1.
Right. But as you guys know, is when your reputation is on the line and you understand how users can get if you put something out there and then, like you said, it does break, it's more of a hassle to try to get that thing fixed and then also regain the trust of your customer base than to just wait till things are smooth and easily integrated and then approach it from that perspective. So I think sometimes that's where the hesitancy comes from, which I completely understand.
Absolutely.
But I do think, you know, putting up these big numbers and we got 8 cores and the M2 chip is going to be super lightning fast, it's going to run like a rabbit. I think that's just more about it, trying to attract some of the larger companies and bringing over, at least on the music side, some of their larger desktop programs over to the iOS market.
Yeah, and it's probably not just for music. I mean, when you're advertising that kind of power, you know, it's going to be for video games, for graphics programs, and for everything else as well. Now, people aren't really outside of the music industry aren't really familiar that really some of the most crazy processing you can do is audio processing and 3D graphics. Like that's kind of the top two things that really CPUs can use, audio processing and graphics processing. But people outside of audio don't really know that, like, we really do need that. We really do need as much power as you can give us. We'll take any power that you can give us because we're running multiple plugins, we're running fab filters, we're running all of these different things. And so for the average person, I don't think they're aware of that. But you're right. I'm just glad that they are advertising it all for music people, for all the graphic stuff as well, but for the games and stuff, but also for the music companies. I hope they are paying attention to these advertisements. And like you say, I think that these numbers are going to hopefully start attracting some of these guys. And we've seen it. Like Baby Audio just recently came to iOS, and so we'll hopefully see, and Scalar 2, of course. So we'll see hopefully more people, because Scalar is definitely an app that should probably maybe use multiple threading or multiple cores, because that thing, it really can suck down some CPU depending on what you're telling it to do, because you can really give it a bunch of options at once, performance options and then key locking options and all these other options, and then now it has to process that all in real time while you're playing. So we definitely need some power. So great points, guys. Any final points on this topic before we move on? Oh, no. Okay. So I think we're all in consensus here that the iPad is pretty powerful, especially with the M1, but we need to get the word out there. And we're just glad that Apple is, doing, putting these M chips in there and telling everybody about it, so that we can hopefully grow our little audio music ecosystem. And maybe people don't know either that, audio is the smallest part of anything. Like it's the smallest part of the movie. It's the smallest part of any company. It's the smallest part of any, so if you guys, it's just the way it is, and it's the way it's always been, but still there is plenty of room to grow, because we are always part of the smaller group. But man, I'm just super glad to see it growing. And I think, the big part of MMP, Mobile Music Pro, is to get more people working with music, and the iPad is going to be the best way to do that. So it's going to be really great stuff, guys. All right, so now we're going to move on to the third and I think final topic of the day, because I believe Mike has to go pretty soon. So we're going to get to this topic and then do the outro. And the final topic is basically kind of what we were just kind of leads into this here, kind of leads in nicely, which is, do we need Logic on, do we need Logic Pro on iOS to convince producers and the greater ecosystem of its actual, capabilities and its maturity and things like that. So I think this is kind of a nice complementary topic. We'll go with Mike now this time. Mike first. So what do you think, Mike? Do we actually need Logic Pro, or because obviously if that comes, that's going to be a huge nuclear bomb that's everybody going to pay attention to. But do we need that in the meantime to get more and more music producers on iPad, or do you think we have enough stuff as it is?
I don't know. I go back and forth on this particular topic. Just within our circles, we talk about this quite a bit. And personally, I think in this case, the word need is a strong word. I personally will say no, but that's coming from somebody that's obviously biased, and I understand what can be done at this point. And, my personal production, I'm still using my late 2017 Pro, and running very, very, deep sessions and things with modulation and automation and stuff like that going on, and the iPad runs fine. But then you talk to the next producer and they will not touch the iPad or the iPhone until they see programs that they're used to seeing on the desktop. So there's a bit of a dichotomy there that some people just don't believe that it is yet pro until you start to see these particular programs. And I don't know, I've never been a believer of that. We can point to numerous examples of people making all kinds of pro tracks, and people doing sync work and people doing film work, and all just using their mobile production setup. But then you have the hardcore desktop guys. So I kind of liken it to the era of music production when hardware was kind of phasing out and software was kind of coming in, and people were making music on the computer, but you still had that crowd that was like, oh, I'll never be able to sound as good as I do on hardware on a computer. And then lo and behold, here we are, 10, 15 years later, and it's like, that's where people start. They start on a computer. So I think, like, James was speaking earlier, we're talking in terms of maybe a decade, but in 10 years times, I think people may start here as a means to start their musical journey, and then venture off backwards into hardware and keyboards and things of that nature. But do we need those apps to actually solidify that? I don't think so, personally.
But what a great point, though. Like the iPad in the future becoming the starting point, where now basically a laptop is, right, like a MacBook. But it totally makes sense for the iPad to now be the starting point, especially as we mentioned earlier, the configuration options is just so simple. All you got to do is just download CUBASIS and add a track. There is no software configuration. There's no audio configuration. There's no drivers configuration you have to worry about. No open source drivers, no, changing all of these different things. It's literally download an app and add a track. So I think, and MobileMusicPro is kind of banking on this, but I definitely believe that the iPad in the future could be a starting point for music producers, just like the laptop is today. Because like you say, used to be some kind of hardware sampler, right?
Yeah.
Start out with a hardware sampler, then maybe you got an MPC or something like that, and then then it went into the actual big old desktops, and then finally went to laptops, and that's when that's where we are right now. A new producer is going to go and get a laptop, and then probably FL Studio or Logic or something like that, right. And then they'll be good to go. So this seems like, especially if they start making some of these these more pro apps available on iPad, that seems absolutely plausible that within 10 years' time, the starting point for music producers will be on the iPad. So great points, Mike.
I think especially when you start to consider the barrier to entry to make music on a mobile platform like iOS. You take $100, $150 into the App Store, you can probably get everything you will need to make music for 10 years, like right now. But $150 on the outside world, you might get maybe one plugin. How many dolls can you buy for $150 right now outside of like Reaper?
Zero. Cubase, the cheapest Cubase I believe is $200.
That's what I'm saying. And even Logic Pro is what, $199? You know what I mean? So when you start looking at the barrier to entry as hobbyists and music producers are getting younger and younger each year, and I have a 14-year-old son, so I see it firsthand every day. They prefer the iPad or the iPhone. It's always with them. It's in a backpack or it's in your back pocket. I don't think we need that, but unfortunately for certain producers, for some people that have been engulfed in that for so long, they won't believe it until they see, oh, Logic Pro is actually here now. Okay, let me jump on over. You know what I mean?
Yep. So I think this kind of thing is already happening. Like what I've seen is the real, like, you have pro producers and then you've got pro producers, right? Pro. It's the pro ones that actually start. They've gone full circle. They're back they're on iOS, even though they've got a whole studio full of gear. They're on iOS. They're making music, and it's not to achieve the same goals that they will be achieving in the studio. It's a different set of goals. Yes. They might take that stuff there later, but they're using iOS because they're on the train or they're on the sofa and they've got some idea, or they don't want to get up from the sofa. It's as simple as that. Like, they've got enough tools to get like a great 8-bar loop. Maybe they can bring it a bit further than that, and then they can just airdrop it to their Mac, and then they can start actually fleshing it out. And I think that's where, like, I think it would be a mistake to try and be something that the iPad is not, right? I know we've talked a little bit about mixing, finding some kind of midpoint between the Mac and iPad, but what iPad and iPhone does really well, the laptop does not do well. So leverage those kind of strengths. And I think the music apps that really do that are, okay, they're not catering to the door so much, but they get a lot of people in the door. Sorry, they get a lot of new people in who have never made music before, and you just wouldn't get that on the desktop with a door, right? Like, not since something like EJ, in like the mid 90s. Right. So I think it's nice that there is there's a way in to introduce people to doors via the iPhone, the iPad.
Absolutely. And there's some people that there's a select niche of people out there that are like, look, the iPad has become just expensive as a desktop for apps because you have to buy all these apps. And it's like, guys, you literally don't have to buy all of these hundreds of apps. You don't have to do that. You're only doing that because you want to, explore, experiment, and see what's going on. I'm guilty of it as well. I buy too many apps as well. But because everybody's buying all these apps, there's been this little upkeep in people that are saying, look, iPad is becoming as expensive as desktop. No, guys, you can get the DAW for $50. That's pretty much all you need. Grab a couple, Jam apps, grab a couple of James's apps, grab a couple of Mike's apps, Low Fly Dirt, $3 or $4. You're done. You do not need to buy every single app in order to actually, produce good music that can become very successful on the iPad. So I just thought I'd throw that out there because I want to before the comments come and start saying that iPad is just the same price. No, guys, it's way cheaper. So I'm glad that was brought up. And then, of course, the other thing is we've sort of seen this play out before with software where like nobody was using FL Studio. It was just Fruity Loops, and then people started making hits, and then bam, all of a sudden, people started going to FL Studio. So it's either waiting for a pro app or a pro producer to make something. People get scared. They get set in their ways. They don't want to jump on something new unless Mike said, unless it's been proven, unless it's going to be smooth, unless it's a guarantee, kind of like a guarantee. So I don't think we need, to have Logic Pro. We don't need a professional producers to with big names to be able to start using the iPad to get people in there. But when it happens, because it's inevitable, it's going to happen, then that is just, of course, going to bring in the floodgates. And that's what we're all kind of waiting for. I think we're all prepping for that because we see the power, we see what it can do. We have the AAV3 standard. Now it's literally just letting the world find that out, figure that out, that you can actually use a mouse and a keyboard and have floating windows and a file system and an external monitor and all that stuff right on your mobile device. And so you can build your big, huge internal studio, or you can just take that thing and go on a mobile journey. So very, very great points. Jam, quiet again, bro. Quiet again. I want to hear your thoughts, man. You're sitting there nice and patient and quiet. I want to hear from you, bro. What are your thoughts on this?
Oh yeah, I think we definitely need Logic Pro on iPads. I mean, GarageBand is great, but it's not enough because, for example, it doesn't support the MIDI plugins. And it's bad for my business because 99% of my apps are MIDI plugins. So personally, that's the main reason. But also, I agree with Mike and James. A lot of newcomers can use iPad and a cheaper DAW, fully-fledged, built by Apple. Lots of Spotify hits made with Logic Pro. It's proven, and they can. People use cheaper plugins, and as you said earlier, like for a few bucks, you can build a really nice setup, and you're ready to go. You're ready to produce, and also Logic Pro on iPad means Apple taking iPad music making seriously. That's a huge message, I think. And it will draw a lot of attention on iPad music making. And Mike mentioned like pro producers doesn't take seriously iPad. Yeah, they are right. But if Apple push that message to them, I think they can take a look at and they would convince about the iPad's power and fun. It would be great for our markets and our business as well. And if we convince pro producers, other pro level desktop people port their apps as well, and I think we will grow rapidly after that point. So I think we definitely need Logic.
Yeah, I've definitely been saying. Look, it sucks that we kind of needed a little bit to broaden our ecosystem. But guys, when it actually comes, because it's going to be inevitable, it will be a nuclear freaking bomb in the music community. Everybody is going to hear about this. Everybody is going to know about this. with it, like it's going to spread so fast and be viral. I believe so viral within the music community that when Apple does that, because like you say, Jam, that really is a signal to the world. See, Apple, when they put the M1 chips, started putting the M series chips in the iPad, is a signal to the world that they want these devices to be the fastest mobile devices on the planet. If they put Logic Pro on the iPad, that is a signal to the world that they want this to be used as a professional, both professional and semi-professional music production device. And, they even said in WWC that more pro apps are coming. They didn't say which ones, they didn't say when, it was very vague, but they've never said that before. They've never said more pro apps are coming to the iPad, but they said it this time. And so I think we can all see the writing on the wall because, like we say, when that drops, it will be a nuclear bomb into the community. Everybody's going to hear about it. It's going to be in every blog post and every freaking Twitter stream. It's going to be everywhere. So I'll definitely be, tweeting about it. I'll be writing a blog about it. I'll be doing a video about it. It's going to be pretty big. So great points, guys. Great discussion. Great conversation. Does anybody have any final comments before we end the show?
I do have a comment.
Okay, please, Mike. Go ahead.
And to your point,
yes, sir.
Earlier, were you saying people almost need to be shown proof? They need guarantees.
Guarantees.
I would just encourage people to James's point to look at iOS for what it is. I think a lot of people go wrong with it because we're looking for our desktop setup to mimic on the iOS platform, when in reality, I think you really should approach it just for what it is and approach it completely different. And then when you look at it for what it is, then that's when the beauty can expound on, but if you're looking for your Ableton, Logic Pro, even Pro Tools setup to be mimicked on the iPad, it's not. Like
it's going to be different, right? It's going to be, has to be somehow different.
Not there yet. Now, time will tell, if we get there, but just approach iOS for what it is. Like you said, you can be sitting on your couch, just chilling, and then just call up the iPad and just start making loops, especially in an app like Block Sway, which I use religiously. You know what I mean? There's apps that are out there that are built for that. And then if you so want to, then take them to your studio and export them out and continue to flesh them out there. But I think just approach iOS for what it is, see it for what it is, and not try to have it be something that it's not. And I think that's a way to approach it, early on starting out.
Great points, because it will eventually most likely be there, but just be realistic about what's going to happen within the next year or two, as opposed to trying to plan too far ahead for 10 plus years ahead for a whole different type of computing device. Right. So yeah, that definitely makes sense to me. Because guys, look at what Steinberg did with CUBASIS, right? That is clearly a DAW designed for mobile. You have everything on one screen, but things like slide out, and then all of their effects you can touch with. Clearly it was a desktop designed from the ground up to be on mobile. So we are expecting these big pro apps to come. I think Mike makes a great point where don't expect them to be exactly the same. Hopefully expect them to be on par with quality, right? Because CUBASIS is still 96. You can go up to 96 kilohertz, super 16-bit 96K, super fast. But you can't do every single thing on CUBASIS that you can do on Cubase, but still the quality is there. So it's going to be a little bit different, but the quality should still be there. So yeah, great point, Mike. All right, so I think we can end it End it here. I'm sure you guys have got some stuff to do, and I'm sure James has got to go to sleep because it's probably 2 or 3 in the morning over there. So let's go ahead and say goodbye to everybody. So James, we'll go with you first. Where can we find out more about you, sir?
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, we've got Amplify website, amplifymusic.com, Focusrite.com. I'm on GitHub. I do a lot of social media, so you may be able to find me there, but I don't use it.
Hopefully you'll find him in our Discord. Hopefully James will be joining our Discord. You'll find him in there too.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. And again, great apps, James. Amplify, love the apps, man. Like Mike said, these things are being used religiously by so many people, like Groovebox and Bloxwave. For me personally, I just love that. Even Henny, the business is using a couple of your apps in his videos, which was fantastic to see. Because again, more apps designed like desktop quality, but clearly designed for the iPad and mobile computing platform. Just great stuff, James. Thanks for all you do, bro.
Thanks for having me.
Yes, sir.
Thanks.
Mr. Jam O'Clay, not Kim O'Clay, but Jam O'Clay, sir. What is going on? Listen, guys, you got before you say anything, Jam, look, I really want to call out all of your apps, bro, because they're all MIDI apps and they're all so useful. Polybud, Melodybud, Scalebud, guys, you have to understand that these apps are on par with desktop quality stuff. Like, I know Scalar just came, but of course I'm loving it too. But guys, that's going to be more expensive, way more expensive than some of these apps that these developers create. Like Jam has a bunch of great stuff that is literally on par and just as good as Scalar. But we're talking $3, $4, $5. So definitely, might think about giving their apps a shot. But Jam, please, man, tell us where can we find out more about you, sir?
Oh, thanks for the shout out.
Yes, sir.
You can follow me on Twitter, CEM_OSCY, name _ last name. Other than that, you can find my apps on keyboardapp.com, and you can have the links for the App Store as well.
Of course, we'll have links to everybody's
stuff too.
Thank you for the
podcast.
Yes, sir. And of course, we'll have links to you and everybody in the description below as well. But just remember, guys, you can just Google CEM Jam, spelled CEM O'Clay apps as well. Definitely Amplify apps. Just Google this stuff. You will find all the information that you need as well. Mr. Mike, man, it's just a pleasure to have you here as well. Again, guys, it's so crazy to use these apps every day and then finally meet the people behind them. So, man, I just want to say again, appreciate you for being here, bro. Tell us, please, where can we find out more about all your stuff? Because you got a lot of stuff.
Yeah, appreciate it, Vortex. Thank you for having me again. I appreciate it. And nice to meet you guys as well. Pretty much everything is on msxaudio.com. It's kind of the hub, our website. Like I mentioned earlier, we primarily do sample pack sound design. We do a lot of work with companies such as Ableton, and I believe we worked with Novation early on when we got on. So we've done some work inside of Groovebox as well, and we got stuff everywhere. And then obviously our apps in the App Store, Chompler, Flytape 2, and then also Low Fly Dirt, as you mentioned. So
yes, Low Fly Dirt. That's got to go on all your drums, people. All your drums.
Absolutely. And on Twitter, we're at MSXII Sound. The XII are actually Roman numerals, all caps, MSXII Sound on Twitter and Instagram.
Do you want to explain behind the name? Yeah,
it's just literally
Go ahead.
My wife and my initials are MS. So Michael Simpson, my wife is Megan Simpson, and the X is just by 2. And so that's how the company kind of got started. So it's pronounced, we just call it MSX. You can call it MSX Sound, you can call it MSX Audio. We're happy to have a conversation with you if you jack it up, So it's just a conversation piece. But thank you guys for having us, and I definitely appreciate the honor. It was all my pleasure here.
Absolutely, man. I get your name wrong all the time. I say MSX. I say MS2 sometimes.
Yeah, it's all good, man.
I say MSX Music. I get it wrong. But guys, of course, all the links will be in the description below. And make sure you check out these guys' apps. Super top quality stuff. And thanks again, guys. Of course, we've got sample packs and stuff on the website, free stuff, premium stuff. Make sure you check out all of that as well. But we will be back again next month with an all-new panel. So thank you guys so much for joining. Until next time, everybody, please keep talking music, and we'll see you guys later. Goodbye. Hey everybody, Vortex here, and if you're not aware yet, we now have over 100 fully edited mobile music tutorial videos. And we make music every single Wednesday live on our channel right inside of CUBASIS on our iPad. Plus, we also have a bunch of free sample packs, guides, and more at our website at MobileMusicPro.com/free. And so if you are into that sort of thing, producing music on your iPhone or iPad, then definitely make sure to subscribe and check out the rest of the videos on the channel that we know you'll love.